My credit card was declined over a $42 grocery bill on a Tuesday morning. When I called my father to figure out what was going on, he didn't even let me explain. He chuckled, smug and entirely unbothered, and said, "I canceled all your cards, Claire. You're trained to follow orders, not manage real money. It's time you learned your place." He thought he was cutting off an ungrateful daughter to force me back under his thumb. He thought he held every single lever of power in our family's massive corporate empire. What he completely forgot was that 3 years ago, when he restructured the family trust to avoid taxes, he signed over the primary signature authority to me. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just drove straight to the bank. 3 hours later, his phone was blowing up with 32 missed calls from his own executive board. "My name is Claire Cooper. I'm 27 years old, and after 5 years as a logistics officer in the Army, I thought I was fully prepared for any crisis." That was until a Tuesday morning at a local grocery store completely flipped my world upside down. I was standing at the register with a few basic items, just $42 worth of groceries, when the cashier slid my card through the terminal. The screen flashed bright red. Declined. Assuming it was just a system glitch, I tried a second card, only for the exact same message to pop up. Feeling a knot tighten in my stomach, I stepped aside and dialed my father, Arthur Cooper. He didn't even let me explain why I was calling. Before I could finish a sentence, he let out a dry, condescending chuckle. "I canceled all your cards, Claire," he said, his voice dripping with smug satisfaction. "You're trained to follow orders, not manage real money. You've been getting too comfortable thinking you run things around here, and it's time you learned your place." He went on to inform me that if I wanted access to funds again, I needed to show up at his corporate office at 4 p.m. sharp to negotiate a modest monthly allowance. He genuinely believed he was putting an ungrateful daughter in her place, forcing me to come crawling back under his thumb. What my father completely forgot, however, was who actually held the legal keys to the kingdom. He thought he was playing a high-stakes game of power, but he was about to learn that in logistics, you never cut off a supply line you don't actually control. I didn't argue on the phone. I didn't raise my voice, nor did I shed a single tear. I simply ended the call, paid for the groceries with a $50 bill I kept tucked in my glove box, and sat in my car in absolute silence. As the engine hummed, my mind drifted back to 3 years ago. My father had suffered a minor health scare right around the same time the family business was undergoing a massive corporate tax restructuring. Terrified of potential tax liabilities and sudden probate issues, Arthur had established a master trust to hold the company's primary liquid assets, real estate portfolios, and operational accounts. Because I had a clean legal record and a military background that made lenders comfortable, he appointed me as the primary trustee and sole executive signature authority. Back then, he treated it as a mere formality, a rubber stamp. He assumed his quiet, duty-bound daughter would simply sign whatever documents he slid across the dinner table without reading the fine print. He couldn't have been more wrong. Over the past 3 years, while he was busy enjoying his status as the Grand Patriarch, I had been meticulously auditing every single ledger, LLC, and line of credit under our family's corporate umbrella. I knew every account number by heart, every authorized user, and every legal loophole built into that trust agreement. My father thought he had just cut off a dependent daughter's spending money. He had no idea that he had actually declared war on the sole officer in charge of his entire financial pipeline. I put the car in drive, bypassed the highway toward his office, and headed straight for First National Bank. When I stepped into the grand marble lobby of First National Bank, the chief financial officer himself, Marcus Vance, came out to greet me. He knew my name, my credentials, and most importantly, he knew the exact binding power of the master trust agreement. I sat down in his private glass office, unzipped my leather briefcase, and placed the certified trust documents on his desk. "Marcus," I said calmly, "I need to exercise full trustee authority effective immediately. I want to initiate a complete security protocol freeze on all secondary corporate credit lines, discretionary executive accounts, and unauthorized personal draw lines." Marcus looked at me, stunned, but he didn't hesitate. Within 20 minutes, the bank's system updated. Every credit card attached to the company's executive accounts, including my father's unlimited platinum card, was instantly flagged and suspended pending primary trustee authorization. I walked out of the bank at precisely 12:15 p.m. and drove to a quiet cafe across the street from Arthur's favorite steakhouse. Right on cue, at 1 p.m., I watched through the window as my father sat down for his weekly power lunch with 3 key institutional investors. Less than 45 minutes later, the waiter brought over the leather bill tray. I watched my father casually hand over his corporate card, only for the waiter to return moments later, leaning in discreetly to inform him that the transaction had failed. My phone immediately began buzzing on the cafe table. It was Arthur. I let it ring. By 2:30 p.m., my voicemail box was filled with 6 furious messages, each one louder than the last, demanding to know what kind of administrative error had occurred. He still thought it was a bank glitch. He still had no idea what was waiting for him at 4 p.m. At 3:55 p.m., I stepped into the glass elevator of Cooper Enterprises and rode it up to the top floor. The reception area was tense. My father's executive assistant wouldn't even meet my eyes as she quietly buzzed me through to the main corner office. When I opened the heavy double doors, Arthur was sitting comfortably behind his massive mahogany desk. Flanking him on the left was his COO, Richard, a man who had made a lucrative career out of nodding along to every arrogant decision my father ever made. Arthur adjusted his golden cufflinks and leaned back, trying to project total control despite the visible vein throbbing at his temple. "Sit down, Claire," he said, gesturing to the leather chair across from him. "I trust your little morning experience gave you some perspective on how the real world operates." Before I could answer, he slid a sleek white folder across the desk. "Inside is a formal amendment to the trust structure. You'll sign over all proxy rights and administrative oversight back to me. In exchange, I'll personally reinstate your credit lines and grant you a generous monthly allowance. Consider it a soft landing for your pride." Richard offered a tight, patronizing smile. "It's a very fair offer, Claire. Your father is being remarkably forgiving about the banking glitch today." I didn't reach for the pen. Instead, I calmly opened my briefcase, pulled out the certified banking printouts I had secured 4 hours ago, and slid them right back across the desk. "I'm not here to sign your amendment, Dad," I said, keeping my voice level and icy. "And that wasn't a banking glitch at lunch." Arthur picked up the banking documents with a scoff, but as his eyes scanned the official seal and the line item freezes, the smug smile vanished from his face. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice dropping an octave. "What did you do?" "I executed my legal rights as the sole trustee," I replied calmly. "At 8 a.m., you told me that I was trained to follow orders, not manage money. So I took a close look at the management of our money. As of noon today, every operational line of credit, discretionary fund, and executive draw account linked to the master trust requires my exclusive authorization to disburse a single cent." Richard's face went completely pale. "Claire, you can't freeze operational capital. Payroll goes out on Friday. Vendor invoices are due tomorrow." "I know," I said, leaning forward. "And I also know about the off-book real estate venture in Miami that my father attempted to finance last week using trust assets as unapproved collateral. A move that nearly drained our liquid reserves below the mandatory SEC compliance threshold." Arthur slammed his fist onto the desk, standing up so fast his leather chair rolled back into the glass wall. "I built this company. You have no authority to lock me out of my own money. Legally, Dad, it isn't your money anymore," I said, matching his stare without flinching. "You signed over control to protect your wealth from taxes, assuming I'd never pay attention. But I spent 5 years coordinating supply chains in active deployment zones. I know how to spot a compromised asset. And right now, the biggest risk to this company's survival is sitting behind that desk." Before Arthur could utter another furious word, the desk phone began ringing incessantly. Red lights flashed across the console. It was the emergency line from the executive board of directors. Richard scrambled to hit the speakerphone button. The voice of our lead board member, David Vance, echoed loudly through the room. "Arthur, what in God's name is happening with corporate accounts? The credit facilities are frozen. Our major vendor payments just bounced, and bank compliance is refusing to clear any transfers without a primary trustee's signature. Arthur's hands trembled as he stared at the phone. David, listen to me. It's a temporary domestic dispute. My daughter. I'm right here, Mr. Vance, I interrupted, stepping closer to the microphone. And this is not a domestic dispute. This is a fiduciary intervention. Over the next 20 minutes, the entire board joined an emergency video conference. While Arthur tried to yell over me and Richard stammered through excuses, I shared my screen and presented a crystal-clear financial audit. I laid out every unauthorized transaction, every reckless loan attempt, and the exact legal framework of the trust. I presented them with a simple choice: continue letting Arthur mismanage the company into regulatory ruin, or back my restructured financial plan that safeguarded our operational capital and protected every employee's job. The board's vote was unanimous. Facing immediate legal exposure and financial collapse, Arthur was stripped of his unrestricted spending privileges on the spot. He was retained in a secondary, non-executive advisory role with zero access to company accounts. For the first time in his life, my father was completely powerless in his own boardroom. In the months that followed, Cooper Enterprises didn't just survive. It thrived under disciplined, transparent management. I stabilized our operational budgets, secured our employee pensions, and put an end to the reckless financial gambles that had put us all at risk. Arthur took his forced retirement quietly. The man who once tried to control my life over a $42 grocery bill now receives a structured, modest monthly disbursement from the very trust he tried to strip away from me. We rarely speak, but when we do, there's no more talk about me learning my place. Standing up to my father wasn't easy, but it taught me a lesson I will carry for the rest of my life. Never let anyone use your silence or your loyalty as a weapon against your self-worth. You are always in control of your own story, as long as you have the courage to stand your ground. Now, I'm curious about how you would have handled this situation. If you were in my shoes, would you have frozen his accounts immediately, or given him one last chance to make things right? Let me know where you're watching from. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories.